Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're in tune to KWPC, Muscatine, Iowa. Welcome to the 2018 Growmark KWPC Fall Ag Roundtable broadcast. We're coming to you live from high atop Muscatine's brand new, luxurious Merrill Hotel and Conference Center. My name is Tom Steever. I'm an anchor and reporter at Brownfield Ag News, heard regularly on KWPC, and I'm grateful to have been invited to host the 2018 Fall Ag Roundtable. Today's broadcast is presented by Community Bank and Trust, Kent Nutrition Group, Monsanto Bayer, Danner Farms, Sinclair Equipment, your local John Deere dealer, True Acre Lee Insurance, Muscatine County Farm Bureau, Duffy Grain in Wilton, Iowa. There is plenty to talk about, and we'll be touching on a lot of subjects. When I last hosted this broadcast, it was in March. President Trump had just announced billions in tariffs against China. Many more billions have been made effective since. The administration has since announced a trade mitigation aid package for farmers to the tune of $12 billion to help soften the blow of the billions in retaliatory tariffs imposed by China. In addition to trade, let's not forget the 2018 Farm Bill. It's kind of almost fallen through the cracks here. Current farm policy expires in less than 1 week. Farmers in the upper Midwest have, in many cases, a record crop to harvest, although some have been touched by drought, others by flooding. All farmers are affected to some extent by the steep drop in commodity prices. Farm income is half of what it was at its peak. We are so fortunate to have assembled a panel of guests who can address these and other subjects, and they will do that. So let's go around the table to begin and have each of you introduce yourself. Bruce, starting with you.
Bruce Reed, represent the Kent Nutrition Group, livestock industry. So glad to be here, Tom.
Very good. Wayne.
Good morning. Wayne Humphreys, president of the Iowa Corn Promotion Board.
And Russ.
Russell Yoder, Iowa Turkey Federation, and a turkey farmer down in southeast Iowa, Mount Pleasant, Washington area.
Flanked by Billie Danner.
Billie Danner, Danner Farms.
And?
Virgil Schmidt, Iowa State University Extension field agronomist.
And banker Sean.
Sean Alworth, Community Bank and Trust.
Ethan, go ahead.
Ethan Smitt, agronomic consultant for Sinclair Tractor.
And Liz.
Good morning. Liz Hobart with the Growmark FS system, and a pleasure to be here today.
Rob.
Rob Schmidt with True Acre Technology.
Heidi.
Heidi Vittetoe with JWV Pork at Washington.
Rob.
Rob Ewoldt with the Iowa Soybean Association. I'm also a grower outside of the Quad Cities.
Representative.
Hi, I'm Representative Gary Carlson from House District 91, which is predominantly Muscatine and Fruitland.
And a Farm Bureau leader right to my right.
Glad to be with you, Tom, and this is Craig Hill. I'm a farmer and president of the Iowa Farm Bureau.
So let's get started. Oh, by the way, we're also expecting Mike Naig, the Iowa Secretary of Agriculture, but he is not here yet. Very busy man, understandably, but he is expected to be with us as well. Craig, let's start with you because here we are in the midst of a lot of issues that are affecting agriculture, affecting farmers. Chief among them, let's start with trade. What are your feelings on what's happening now, and bring us up to date?
Let me begin, Tom, with farmers are marvelous producers. We always achieve beyond anyone's goals or expectations each and every year, and it looks like Iowa's yields are going to be off the chart again this year, despite the challenges we've had. But while being good producers, we sure are challenged with profit opportunities. And this market today is very difficult. It's unpredictable. And it makes long-term and short-term decisions very, very hard to make. Again, we're very productive, but as far as profitability and being able to make those bank loan payments and all the things we need to do, it's going to be a difficult year.
And has just joined us now, Mike Naig, Iowa Secretary of Agriculture. Welcome to the panel.
Well, Tom, it's good to be here. A lot of friendly faces around the table, and I'm sorry to Mr. Hill that I walked in the middle of his statement there, but great to be back.
So talk to me, too, about how these issues, and when I say these issues, let's concentrate on this issue, the trade issue right now. How are producers in Iowa being affected?
Well, there's no doubt that well, first of all, let's back up and raise the level and remind folks how important trade is to Iowa agriculture. When you talk about in Iowa, we're the #2 state in terms of the value of our ag exports, and so this is critically important to our profitability and success as a state. And so we need to make sure that we've got markets. There's no doubt that the retaliatory tariffs, particularly from China, are impacting our markets, which is impacting our producers, and we know that that's having some harm. We've seen a trade assistance package that the Trump administration has rolled out. Again, I think that's a recognition of the fact that there is an impact, a negative impact on our markets. Let's also remember that especially in the case of China, that this relationship needed work before the tariffs came into place here. We had trade barriers that had existed for many years on biotech trade approvals, corn, ethanol, DDGs, beef, poultry. We should be participating at a much higher level in that Chinese market, and we haven't been able to date. And so that has had a negative impact on our markets as well. So there's work that needs to be done, but again, there's no doubt that the retaliatory tariffs are impacting our markets.
I'm going to go around the table and just get kind of a what's on your mind view of what's happening to each of you individually. Bruce Reed, we were talking about the organization, the Nutrition and Production Development Group of Kent Nutrition. So talk to me a little bit about what's affecting that at the moment and what's on your mind.
Well, as Mike mentioned, markets from the livestock industry have been, I think, negatively affected by some of the tariff rules that have come into play. One thing that's on our mind in the last month is the African swine virus and how that affects our industry from mainly a feed ingredient standpoint of origination from ingredients coming from China. And so we're taking biosecurity measures on that and working with our suppliers on how we can clarify where our ingredients are coming from and things like that. So,
well, you mentioned African swine fever, and of course that's been high on the mind of a lot of people too. And I think a lot of relief that it's not on our shores, but who knows what could happen in the future. What does it do to profitability?
Actually, right now it's probably affected us in a positive manner with some of the scares out there on the meat side of it, with limited meat transportation ability in China. Of course, our exports are always on top of our mind, and we're some concern what that does from an export industry standpoint from the swine side of it. But probably the biggest thing we have is just ingredient verification of where things are coming from.
Well, Humphreys, what does it do to, let's just stay on that just for a moment. What kind of a worry is that to corn utilization, to corn, because we're talking about exports as well. It must do something for demand.
Demand for the pork production?
For pork production, but also demand for corn.
Absolutely. African swine fever is a very contagious disease, and I just got back from China on Saturday night and burned a $150 pair of shoes because I didn't want to take any chances coming back into the state of Iowa with anything that could challenge our swine herd. I want all of your listeners to know, Tom, that these commodity groups are working on trade diligently, maybe even more so than before. Maybe from the backside, although we support the administration and President Trump and hope that there's a good outcome to all of these negotiations that are and are not going on. We are working on it from the backside. We encouraged trade missions to Mexico and to Canada and to China and to South America to keep those relationships viable with our buyers that have historically been on our side. In China, they said as soon as this trade brouhaha blows away, we are ready to do business with you.
Part of that brouhaha is the trade mitigation package, and of that, corn growers are offered a penny a bushel. Comment on that.
Well, there has been some blowback on the discrepancy between corn and soybeans, but in Iowa, I think that's muted because most corn growers also produce soybeans. So it's not quite as acute here as it is in some other places, with maybe some continuous irrigated corn production, for example.
And before we move off that, we should also say there is some rationale to that. Could you explain that?
There is some rationale about the market loss due to trade mitigation, due to trade discrepancies.
Yeah.
There is some rationale, some numerical proof positive that that's the right amount of money for the two commodities.
In other words, more bushels of soybeans being affected by the tariffs than there are corn bushels.
That's exactly right.
Yes, yes. Russ Yoder from the Turkey Federation, Iowa, the Iowa Turkey Federation, welcome. And what's new with you?
Oh, just things are getting better. We're probably one of the bright spots in the commodity group. Breast meats have been inching up. I don't know if people are just getting tired of eating everything else, but breast meats at 209 as of the other day. It's a lot better than chicken. Chicken's under $1 on the breast meat market. So we're actually looking a lot better than a lot, but, you know, we've also had some losses. Hurricane Florence took care of about 3.5 million turkeys over in South Carolina. You hate to see that, and those farmers are going to have one heck of a mess cleaning that up. And I'm glad I'm sitting here in Iowa right now and not having to deal with that. But, you know, things are looking better. We support Trump in all our trade deals, and because, you know, we've been left out of NAFTA, left us out of Canada. We can't we can't export to Canada, but they can flood our markets with their milk. And, you know, that's not fair. You know, NAFTA, I've been saying this for a long time, NAFTA is not a fair trade agreement for the Turkey Federation and a lot of other commodity groups. But, you know, Mexico, 70% of our exports go to Mexico. And at one time, China was our #2 exporter for poultry. Can't go there anymore because a duck in Oregon got AI back in 2010. Now, that's not fair either, but, you know, life isn't fair, and my mom told me that a long time ago, and the older I get, the more that seems to be the case. So, nope, things are looking better. We're hoping they can get some stuff going. This South Korea deal got done here the other day, and hopefully we can get some stuff going in there. And I don't know, I was in Washington, D.C. earlier this year, and a couple of people kept talking about India, and I don't know if Mike knows any more about that, if he can comment on that, but maybe that's something that, you know, that's an avenue for us too. So.
Very good. And I want to bring that up again about what you said, the difference between Canada and Mexico in your trade prospects, because NAFTA, of course, works among all three, or at least it was designed to do that from the start. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Billie Danner, we talked. I remember visiting with you in March, and I seem to remember the phrase short-term pain, long-term gain. What do you feel about this trade thing, and have your feelings changed about it?
No, my feelings haven't changed about that. I guess. I would say personally, I kind of saw this coming, and no, yeah, I think there is going to be definitely short-term pain, and you know, I realize there's a lot of frustration. I guess I'm probably not to the frustration level that some are, because maybe the short term might be longer term than we think, but you know, it's going to take time to get there, definitely. But my feelings haven't changed on that. As it was alluded to a little bit ago, these things are going to take time, and we've had some wins, and I'm not sure they're recognized, just as Russ alluded to.
So I want to talk about the harvest a little bit with Virgil. I'll get back to you on that too, Billie, and see how things are going with you. But I want to talk. I saw combines in the field yesterday. I actually rode on one going through a cornfield just below the Iowa line into Missouri, but I saw a few more in soybean fields. How are things maturing? How's the progress, and how's the harvest?
Well, things have matured actually ahead of schedule. We had, after the coldest April on record, we had the 3rd warmest May and the 10th warmest June. And if you look at at an ideal year, you'd have May and June be above normal temperatures to get the crop along as far as we can, as quickly as possible, and then we'd like to have July and August back off a little bit to extend the grain fill period. July and August were both within 1 degree of being normal, so we didn't back off there. But because we got so far ahead in May and June, the corn all matured about 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and soybeans even about 1 week ahead of schedule. And so that allowed people to get started early. I have heard of some tremendous yields locally. Now you get down to South Central and South Central and Southeast Iowa, there where they had the major drought. They have some very, very poor yields. And you get up north of Highway 20, and they were underwater. And so we were kind of in the sweet spot right locally here, maybe a little bit on the dry side, but not too bad. Probably the big concern right now is getting that crop out of the field before some storms come along and take it down. But harvest is going very, very well and hearing very good yields locally.
Sean Alworth is a banker. I want to talk about the economic outlook with Sean and what that brings up for concern among ag lenders. How is that going? Talk to me about how the farm credit thing is going.
I think cash flow is probably the biggest issue right now that we're seeing with these prices, and we're hoping, the trade assistance package will kind of leverage that a little bit this year. But we're hearing some good yields out there, so. I think it's just partnering with a bank, a good banker, and sitting down and looking at the balance sheet and seeing how debt service will end up this year and how that will be impacted.
Yeah. What's your degree of concern about loan serviceability?
It's just basically servicing that debt and being overly leveraged on the farm, and just basically looking at that at a point in time and just seeing how that will assess, and then just assess the risk and try to cover that debt service for the year, basically. So,
Ethan Schmidt was on a combine just this morning, so talk to me about what you saw and how it's going.
Thanks. As Virgil said, yields are fairly good in certain areas and not as good in others, depending on where you were and what we did. As far as our customers and what we're doing goes, we always say knowledge is power in a lot of ways. So we're expanding our main offerings to include a lot of production economics to get to a true price per bushel for our growers to know, to have a better idea when it comes to marketing. Because that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses with a lot of our customers is we could grow 260 bushel corn, but marketing is, especially in these times, up and down again and back up, and trying to find the right times and the right prices to pull the trigger. So, but harvest is going well, like Virgil said. Hopefully the storms later today don't bring the winds they're saying, and we can keep going.
Liz Hobart, Liz and I visited just a little bit yesterday, and she told me about her role with Growmark FS. With sustainability, how is the company engaging sustainably?
Mm-hmm. So I think as we talk about a lot of the issues that have been mentioned here, and I'm sure over the rest of this segment we'll be talking about a lot of other issues that creates uncertainties for our farmers. And so whether that's directly, indirectly, short-term, long-term. So from the Growmark FS system, we are committed to helping our farmers be economically viable, but doing so with sustainable practices. So the definition of sustainability there's a lot of definitions for sustainability. Growmark defines it as enduring over time. It's those activities, those processes, those products, those services that have an economic, that have that has an environmental benefit to our growers. And we look at it from a holistic perspective from the Growmark system. We look at it definitely from the agronomic piece of it when you talk about nutrient management, but we also look at it from energy. We look at it from our logistics and our transportation piece. We look at it from the facility planning, and definitely with our investment within our communities and our investment within our workforce. And we do that a lot of times with partnerships and collaborations throughout the system and with some of our partners, many of who are around the table today.
Rob Schmidt, I want to hear a little bit about the company and about what you do. Tell me about that.
Okay. Yeah, TrueAcre was formed we saw a hole in the market with technology. You had a lot of farmers out there who'd spent a lot of money on equipment, and they didn't know what to do with all that technology. So that's sort of where we started, and there was a lot of different brands and different machines, and there just seemed to be a hole for a company who could come in and be colorblind. And as we dove into it even more, we found out that there was guys who either needed equipment, wanted some of that technology, but didn't know what to buy, needed help figuring out what to buy, or they had bought it, but now how do I even use it? Because I use the monitor and the planner once a year for 2 or 3 weeks. What do I got to do to get that thing running again, make it work? Who do I call when it goes down? That type of stuff. And then the third thing was a lot of people have it. They've had 20 years worth of data, but what do I do with the data? How does it make me any better? How does using technology help me get a better return on investment for my operation? How does it even let me zero down into, that one piece out of there that I've been pouring the groceries to, trying to get a better return on investment, get a better yield. But hey, you know what? It's never going to happen. Let's come up with a different way to get a return on investment on that piece of ground there. So that's what we build a lot of our model on there. And then we've also went into the crop insurance side where we're partnering with crop insurance carriers to help them take all the technology right out of the planter, right out of the combine, be able to efficiently and automatedly take it into crop insurance. So when they have to do all their reporting, they can drop it right into the crop insurance carrier. They get savings on premium typically, because typically the acres that are showing up in that field from the FSA aerial maps tend to be higher than what you're actually planting. So you're paying more premium. You're also getting a lower APH because your production's being spread across there. So we're trying to just help them even be more efficient on that. And it also helps the agent and the crop insurance carrier too. So a couple different angles that TrueAcres is going down right now.
I want to talk more about the hog situation as it pertains to China, because China is a prolific customer in U.S. pork. Heidi, Vittetoe, how is it affecting pork producers and you?
Well, the first thing I want to say as we talk about the pork industry is that, yes, the tariffs have had a big impact on pork prices right now, but probably the biggest impact has come from overproduction. And just as Craig had mentioned at the outset, that one thing Iowa farmers do really well is produce. In the pork industry, we are an extremely cooperative industry. And so if somebody says that there's 9 billion mouths to feed by 2050, we're like, we can have it by Tuesday. So our desire to meet the needs sometimes is not paced with those actual customers being born yet, for one thing. And so that has created what I think is really the bulk of the problem. The coincidence of this tariff situation with that oversupply has exacerbated the whole situation. And then again, the combination for us, Mexico takes 50% of the hams that we produce in America. So to have had a ripple or a disruption in that trade, hams this year, inclusive of the tariff, actually got cheaper to Mexico than they were a year ago without the tariff. So everything moves at a price. We're in the sell it or smell it industry. So our product keeps moving, which is different than grain producers who are blessed/cursed with a storable commodity, because you can store it, therefore apparently you must store it. So when people have that freedom to do that, then it becomes an opportunity to defer making marketing judgments or decisions. And that's one of the things we've tried to help the producers, the people who supply grain to us with this year on a kind of a small basis, with getting a seasonal pool program so that people would take advantage of what are seasonally the better times of year to market your grain. And they've got, right now, they would have at least a 70-cent advantage over people who did not avail themselves of that. So even though we have kind of bad grain markets right now, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there have been some good opportunities. But Liz's phrase was risk management was about enduring over time, or sustainability was about enduring over time. And risk management is a very key component of sustainability.
You mentioned overproduction. How often is it that pork producers get this cycle of overproduction, low income?
Every time we make money. We are kind of low on imagination. So if we start making money at something, we think we should do more of it. And I'm not saying it, it's like the tides. It just is.
Yeah.
And the pull of the moon on the tides is like the pull of profitability on pork producers. We just do it, and to our own peril. And especially in an industry like the one that we're in, that has so much difference between the sizes of the players, that even if a person as an individual operation says, no, I think that's not a good decision. No reason to expand right now. You're still on the expansion train, whether you expand it or not. So,
Like that cure for high price is high price. Rob, with the Iowa Soybean Association, you must have a degree of concern, some at least, about what's happening with trade, what's happening with U.S. trade policy. Tell us what you think.
Well, yeah, we're very concerned. It's, I guess the biggest concern that I have is strict with dealing with China is, they're taking one out of every 3 rows of beans in Iowa, so they're a big player. And what concerns me most is when you have a trade delegation come over from China and they say how they're going to change their rations in their feed on that hog, on their hog feeding, and they're going to try to go from 20% protein down to a 12% protein diet. Well, they do that if they can do that, which Heidi's more into the nutrition, but we've done it here, taking some protein out. If they can do that, that's going to take about, I think they said 70 million metric tons that they don't need. Well, that's close to what the United States sells them. That's concerning. If they're able to change that feed ration, then we need to find a new home for beans. And we're looking elsewhere. The Soybean Association, we're going into Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, trying to find. India now is going to probably be neutral in their exporting of soybeans, so that means there could be some people there to buy. If there was a bright side, and I'm not saying there is, low prices move a lot of commodity, and with the yields that we're seeing right now early on in harvest, I believe that we will find a home for these beans. But if you look at what our river basis, I deliver all of my crop to the river terminals, and I don't know if I've ever seen a basis at 90-some or 2. We've seen as high as $1.02, or 102 points under. So I've never seen that. Not that I've been farming a really long time, but so it tells me that we have an issue going out of the Gulf right now. We need to find a home for some beans.
Have you cut any beans?
I've cut some, yes. I've cut some. We've seen, above average yields right now, 75. I've talked to a lot of people. We've had some emails shooting around through the association, and it sounds like 70. If you're growing below 70, you're not doing a good job this year. I mean, it's just I've seen numbers. I remember when 75 bushel yield was just, man, you were doing backflips, and now this year it sounds like it's average in what I've heard from other people and what I've seen. We got into some beans that I didn't think were going to do that, and they surprised me. They really did. So,
yeah, we'll get back to that in a while about how the harvest is going. Representative Gary Carlson is the chairman of the House Transportation Committee at the Iowa State House. What's going on there, and what do you look forward to when the new session comes around?
Well, I think overall, from the session as a legislator, we need to keep a very watchful eye on what the impact of the tariffs and low commodity prices are going to do for the state of Iowa. Because I laugh a little bit when Heidi talks about how pork producers invest. Well, the state doesn't always use a lot of imagination either. And so when income looks like it's a little better in the state, then the state starts to think about how they might spend it. But we forget that a good bit of the revenue we get comes from income tax, which is telling us what happened in the past is not necessarily indicative of what's taken place in the future. And so while revenue is on target from the last fiscal year budget and looks promising at the state level, that's the wrong time to get too excited about spending when we need to make sure that we are still staying as a good structured economy. On the transportation side, the governor did make the proclamation during harvest season, like governors have done many years, to try to improve the productivity. And as we've continued to make investments into our roads, we made some policy changes also to help, especially the counties, be more efficient at some of the road and bridge projects that they have. So I think we've done a lot of things positive in tax reform legislation. We started to increase the 179 depreciation, which impacts a lot of people in the agricultural sector, and we did some water quality funding last year, which was promising. So I think we've done a lot of things to try to help with agriculture, but there's still so much more to do, and I think the watchful eye on revenue is going to be the real key.
Very good. We'll talk more about that. We started around the table with Craig Hill, the Iowa Farm Bureau president, about his views on trade and how things are going in that regard. I want to continue with that because I started the program by saying we also have a farm bill that's expiring here in just a few days. So what are your views about what's happening with farm legislation, what might be coming up, and any concerns that you might have about that?
Well, I've been fascinated by the comments around the table here this morning, and I want to relate to Liz Hobart's comment about enduring over time, and that equation of time is one that I wanted to speak to because this tariff and trade skirmish that we find ourselves in, whether it be India, Turkey, China, Canada, Mexico, all around the world, we're fighting every battle at once. I don't think this is going to go away soon. And so for a lot of producers in their marketing efforts, they need to think long term, and that long term may be 3 to 5 years. We could be in some form of battle. So when opportunities present themselves for profit, I would encourage farmers to take advantage of that. And Gary, in terms of revenue for the state, there's a study out now that shows 100 million reduced revenues coming into the state as a result of this, and you can put the pencil to that over time and what that may impact your decisions going forward. The Farm Bill is a safety net for producers. The crop insurance provisions are very, very important to us, and it's working very well. I think the most satisfactory program in the Farm Bill is crop insurance for producers. It's going to kick in this year for a lot of those that were impacted by drought or by flood, but the Farm Bill expires September 30. And it's very unlikely, in fact, I think it's nearly improbable that we will get a new Farm Bill before that expiration date. The House will go on recess until the midterm elections, and so whether we get an extension or whether we come back after the midterms, I can't profess to that, but we will not have a new Farm Bill before the September 30 deadline. And that frustrates producers because you want some predictability. And even though ARC and PLC and some of the programs that we have, those reference prices and so on, give you some security, without that Farm Bill, it's really, really, as I mentioned in the initial comments, it's difficult to make decisions.
And Mike Naig, I heard an amen from you on producer uncertainty as far as the Farm Bill is concerned. So on a statewide level, how do you relate to farmers with what's going on in Washington and progress or not progress in the Farm Bill?
Well, I think that is the word that we keep hearing, uncertainty. And so when you think about whether it's the trade situation, we have now we've seen there's reason to be hopeful that we're headed in the right direction on NAFTA, but we need to see it concluded. We've seen progress on the Farm Bill, but I agree with Craig. I think at this point, it's very, very difficult to see how this gets done before Sunday. And so we're looking at now uncertainty on the Farm Bill. When you look at things related to the renewable fuels standard and year-round access to E15, doing something about curtailing or at least bringing sunlight to small refiner waivers that EPA has been granting, there's uncertainty around renewable fuels policy. And so, again, it's uncertainty layered upon uncertainty. And so what we do and what we continue to do, at least in my office, working with the governor, working with our congressional delegation, is to advocate for our farmers and our businesses and continue to urge the administration to see action, or continue to urge Congress to take the action that we need them to take. So that's what we're trying to do. It's what we're doing every day, attempting to bring, again, some certainty into this marketplace.
Let's get off policy for just a little bit and tell me what you see out there. As I said, I saw some combines in the fields yesterday. Talk about this disparity from north to south as far as the amount of rain is concerned. I've heard of 45 bushel corn coming, being at least adjusted, 45 bushel corn down in the southeast corner of the state.
It's been a challenging year, one of great weather variability, but I guess that's what we're used to. Our farmers know that comes with the territory. I will tell you, I had just an occasion here back. It was during county fair season, and so I had started the day in Davis County, which was the driest county in the state of Iowa at that time. I think it was something like 8 or 9 inches below average rainfall, and ended that evening in Dickinson County, which was something like 10 inches above average in terms of rainfall at that time, and saw everything in between. So we have disaster declarations in northern Iowa related to flooding and too much water, and we've got disaster declarations in the southern part of the state due to not enough. Yeah. But as has been said many times, when you look across the center part of our state, really east to west, there's some phenomenal looking crops and yields out there. So I think we're all anxious to get in and see what's actually out there. As Rob said, you can look at it from the road, you can walk in it, and still it takes getting out there and seeing what's actually out there. So I think the numbers yesterday were at 5% harvested on corn and 8% harvested on soybean. No surprise, the higher levels of completion are at east central, south central, and southeast Iowa. Northwest and really across the northern part of the state continues to be wet. I'm from northwest Iowa, Palo Alto County. I was on our farm not the weekend before last, and we're anxious to get out there, but it's wet now, and we won't start here for another few days.
Yeah. My home is in the southeastern corner of South Dakota, and some of the neighbors, the old neighbors up there, had 6.5 inches of rain.
Yes.
So they are underwater, and didn't seem all that concerned about it. They said, "Oh, it'll be a week or two before we're in the field," but they're confident about getting in the field, and actually things look good.
Yeah.
Up in that part of the world. But it affects the market. Bruce Reed, what does it do to inputs as far as from a feed manufacturer's standpoint?
Well, I'm from Dickinson County, so I know what my parents are fighting up there. And so we're seeing the variability. I talking to people in Missouri yesterday. They're seeing 40 bushel yields, sometimes at the best. And they're fighting some mycotoxin issues down there. So in our plants, we're working with our feed producers, our producers down there. How do we mitigate some of those concerns? And then I was on the phone this morning with Northwest Iowa, and we're 3 weeks behind. And we're trying to buy corn because we're short up there, and we need harvest to start to happen. But with 6 inches of rain on Monday, I believe it was, that they got, we have concerns of keeping corn supply in tune with some of our plants up there. So from that side of it, every day we work with our producers on inputs. Heidi alluded to it. We're always at a best cost situation with our producers, and how can we help them from the diet side of it, or the rations, be competitive in the market to produce lower cost, beef and poultry and swine. So every day we live that from Maine to Colorado on how can we help our producers better inputs.
Wayne Humphreys, you've been you're the president of the Iowa Corn Promotion Board. So have you been on the combine, and how does it look where you are?
We combined some beans. They're loading the last truck this morning, so we'll know exactly what they yielded. I don't have any real good idea. I do know that my friends in northern Iowa are worried about the water problems because of stock quality. So there is, while maybe there is no hurry in some communities, there is a real concern in others about stock quality and about being able to bring that corn into the combine. So not only the grain quality, but also stock quality for harvestability is a challenge.
Sure. And I think, Ethan, you had mentioned something about that, about stock quality. So what are you seeing? Because there's been some wind, some's on the ground. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so a week ago today, we had anywhere from 50 to 70 mile an hour winds come through. Took some corn down, especially in poor areas, so it kind of piling on top of the poor yields as now it's laying on the ground. As far as being an equipment dealer, we've seen a fair number of corn reels, other systems of trying to help get the crop in the machine. But again, it sounds like they're saying maybe this afternoon another round of storms with wind, so hopefully those can stay away because, due to wetness, stock quality is an issue down in certain areas or even all over the place. drought or just general dryness and heat all year long has eroded away stock quality in this area. So I know people are in a hurry to get both crops out because beans are ready right now and the corn's drying down quickly. So it's kind of all hands on deck everywhere.
Absolutely. We go through it every year. But Wayne, I want to stick on this corn harvest a little bit too. Do we have a home for this?
It'll all get harvested, and it will all be in bins or in a pile somewhere. We have the increased numbers of hogs that we'll be consuming here at hand. There is a ready market around the world for our corn. And a matter of fact, we're sitting here looking out over the Mississippi River. 30% of the corn in Iowa is exported, and 60% of that goes right down this river, right to the Gulf of Mexico. And there is a ready market for it. We just need to get over the trade challenges that we have, and the world is looking forward to using our corn.
I think you're seeing more and more bins all the time. I was on a farm yesterday, and there stood 350,000 bushels of corn storage, yet storage is going to be at a premium. Is it going to be a problem?
It is. Rob alluded to the basis, and storage eliminates some of that problem, but it also creates others because it extends that basis level out into the season further than just at harvest. Building a bin does solve a marketing problem. You don't have to sell it if you can build a bin. You can just put more corn in more bins.
Yes, yes. Russ, Yoder, you had mentioned on our first go-around about the disparities in trade, how not everyone is on the same page as far as NAFTA is concerned. Expand on that a little bit, what your prospects are, where your primary markets are for turkey growers.
Well, most of ours is domestic. That's pretty much where our breast meat is and everything. Everything that gets exported is usually dark meat, then the thighs, the necks. We need to do a better job. I keep preaching this time and time again. Why aren't we selling our turkey wings to Buffalo Wild Wings or to Pizza Hut, or Jurassic Park would have been a great deal. Why do you want to have a little chicken wing when you can have a Jurassic wing? But we're still behind in those type of marketing. But up in Canada, there was a trade group running around up there, and they kind of laughed. They were all on a bus, and this Ferrari goes whipping by him, and he goes, "Oh, there's one of the turkey growers up here," But they have their quota system up there, and then if they have too much, what do they have? They have to get rid of it. What do? They come down and dump it on us, and whether it's milk, pork, beef, you name it. It's the way it is up there. So, NAFTA it's supposed to be a two-way street here. Well, it's not, and it's just been that way with the ag for a very long time.
You did mention, though, that a lot of your exports go to Mexico. So how do you feel about the agreement that's recently been inked with Mexico? Or that's
everything that I've been told, I've had conversations with Ernst and Grassley, everything else, that's been good. They've been waiting on Canada. Yeah. And they told, it was funny how they were there in July out in D.C., the Turkey Federation, and they said that they told Trump, we're ready to part ways with NAFTA. We're going to do a bilateral deal, and there was enough senators on board to where they were ready to go. Now, of course, Canada steps back in, and whether that all gets done or not, I don't know all the logistics on how all that works. But no, we need our Mexico, our counterparts down there. They want us down there. And we need to be down there, and we need to be also, South Korea. Hopefully, the TPP different. There's supposed to be some stuff going on there. It's not going to be the TPP. It's more. I don't know. Trump likes those bilateral. He doesn't like big trade agreements. Mm-hmm. As I was watching on CNBC yesterday, but hopefully we can get some things going there.
Mike Naig wants to.
If I can just interject, I think that Russ raises a great point. It's something that we don't want to. We want to make sure we don't lose in this conversation around trade. Is that there are ample examples of where we've had trade disruptions, where we've had some tariff barriers and some non-tariff barriers that have existed for years that need to be addressed. This is not the first time that agriculture is dealing with tariffs. And so I think there's you mentioned, Russ mentioned that TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership agreement that the United States pulled out of. Now you've got TPP minus the U.S. or CPTPP, I think. There's reason for us to play offense on trade. So we need to take care. We need to hold our trading partners accountable. Certainly China, there's plenty to work on. We need to secure a true NAFTA 2.0, Canada and Mexico. But we've got to play offense on trade and try to solve some of these issues that have really been barriers for quite some time. So there's an upside there, but we need to get on an offensive footing here and go work on those things.
China wants us there. I mean, I was always told that Chinese would pay $10 for a gallon of milk that was stamped USDA before they would pay $3 a gallon that said made in China. They want us there. They love, we complain about regulation in the United States. Well, there they want it. They need it. So that's where we need to be.
Can add some value that way. Yes, Wayne.
To tag on to both Mike and Russ's comments, a couple of years ago when China completely shut off because of anti-dumping and countervailing duties, they shut off the DDG imports from the United States completely. But yet, due to the commodity groups and the expertise that we have on the ground in other countries in the world, we exported a record amount of DDGs to the world, with China taking absolutely zero that year. So it forces us to diversify our marketplace. I might also tie the Farm Bill to trade. If the Farm Bill expires, which it sounds like it's going to, market access programs and foreign market development go away. All of our foreign ag services go away. But in the trade mitigation package, there's a paragraph down there that prescribes $200 million one time for trade development. And so we commodity groups, organizations, are using that to help our diversification program to take the countries that are not currently customers and turn them into loyalists to our products, whether it be meat or fuel or grain.
Yeah, we talk about China filling their needs through South America, but where's the next China? Where do we go for our next trading partner that's going to equal that big market?
Russ mentioned India. That's a possibility, and all of Southeast Asia. Something like 1.5 billion people live in multiple countries. It's not a homogenous organization. It's not a homogenous population. It takes work. It'll be expensive to develop it, but that's where the population is in Southeast Asia.
So, and on the subject of harvest, Billie Danner, I glossed by you the first time on how things are going at your place. So, how's the harvest there, and is the harvest there yet?
We've been hitting it pretty hard. As Virgil and Ethan talked about all the factors, the very warm May, the very warm June. Maturity was just at a record pace with the corn. Actually, I was just commenting before this program started to someone, have not seen this type of degradation on September 25th like this. It's something more reflective of November 25th. We've been in it, and the stock quality is absolutely the worst I've seen for this time of year. We're actually struggling with, do you stay after the corn harvest and get it before it's on the ground, or do you go to beans? It's a constant struggle, and and a lot of that has to do too with those factors. The last month has been wet, and that hasn't helped any either. Actually, last week kind of seemed monsoonal, actually. But that's where we're at.
What do we do about it? How do we get away from the poor stock quality?
It's just a factor of it's just one of those seasons. I mean, actually the thing I'm probably more worried about at this point is all this rainfall. We could go into, they've got a lot of chance for rain next week. We haven't experienced one of these really wet falls for probably over 20 years, and we're shaping up to be like we're saturated, and it only takes an inch or two now to really knock you out of the field for 3 or 4 days.
Absolutely. Same question to you, Virgil Schmidt from Iowa State University. What is are you looking down the road and how to avoid these problems with stock quality?
Well, that's one of those natural processes, so you can't stop it. What you can do is examine each field and determine the quality of the stocks, and then queue up the ones that are worst to be harvested first because they're most vulnerable, and then kind of go down that track. So we're pretty much in a reactionary mode as far as that. I think the other thing with, particularly with prediction for rains and so forth, that we are concerned about, there was an allusion to this earlier down in Missouri where they have some ear molds and so forth going on. We have that potential here too, depending upon, again, what happens, how much rain gets into those husks and so forth. But Fusarium and Gibberella, which can create some mycotoxins that Heidi is very familiar with, that can be very detrimental to feeding. That is a concern that might happen. And then likewise down in the severe drought area, there is concern about aflatoxin. I know the plant down at Eddyville has already rejected some loads because of aflatoxin.
So how widespread is that? Are you hearing isolated reports, or is it?
At this point, it's isolated, and we hope it stays that way. But again, we'll find out when the combines hit the fields. But I think one of the other things, and from a local standpoint here, people need to be doing, besides checking stock quality, is also be checking the ear quality. And again, if they're starting to see some of those ear molds showing up, queue those fields up to harvest first too.
Very good. I want to go back to some of these subjects that we've been talking about. As far as we talked with Sean a little bit about farm credit and about the viability of farm customers out there. So what's going to be happening with the farm economy here? What can we look for?
A lot of the customers that are coming in are worried about interest rates right now too. With the farm economy, it's a rising rate environment. Prime's 5%. We've seen a 50 basis point uptick in the last 8 months. That's a big piece of it on the balance sheet, and it's just to understand what that looks like for the 2019 season on operating money, and it's an individual basis. So we'll see what that looks like and what the Fed plans to do with that.
By the way, it appears you probably weren't around for this, but what's the chance of a repeat of the mid '80s?
I was born in 1985, so we hope to not see that. There's some sustainability we're seeing on the farm. A lot of the assets are paid down that we see on the farm. There's a lot of ground that wasn't over leveraged in the last 08 issue that we had. So I don't foresee another 80s happening, but I guess we'll see.
Heidi, Vittetoe, I want you to address the farm economy and how this is affecting pork producers and what you're doing to mitigate this poor economy, the poor commodity prices.
Well, one thing that's in our favor, not in your favor or others around the table, but is that feed is affordable. I think our cash bid for corn was below $3 lately. That doesn't mean anybody's selling it for that, but nonetheless, it speaks to feed prices that are not going to get away from us. Far bigger of a concern in my mind right now than things that I don't have any control of is what are we doing to keep from having the disaster that would be African swine fever? Because if the number quoted there was $100 million in reduced revenue due to the current farm income, you ain't seen nothing yet until we see what happens if America's pork industry was decimated by, it doesn't take much, it takes an outbreak. It might be a farm, but at this point, we were just on a webinar yesterday talking about have they got regionalization in place or something that draws some boundaries around that, and that to me is more scary, I guess, than whatever the current situation is with pork production. I do want to say though, whether you're a grain farmer or whether you're a pork producer, right now, the hog market is by no means great. It's not even break even. But summer of next year is offering prices that contribute to a profile of not having it be a complete washout. On the other hand, if ASF hits everybody but us, we got a good cash thing going. I don't want the, what do you call that word, schadenfreude? I don't want to be taking joy at anybody else's bad fortune. And so it's hard to know how to sell your product, because what if something like that happened? You know, it's just there's so many what ifs. Somebody was talking about that before. It's like some days you sit there and you're like, I got too many variables. I can't do this. You know, you just need to cool down for a little bit. So,
yeah. Does when you hear about African swine fever in China, what does that change on your farm? Do you do anything to either prepare, to prevent?
First thing it makes me want to do is sit far away from Wayne Humphreys. Because I know, and I'm saying that sincerely, but not really about Wayne.
And as much as I would like those $150 shoes.
Yeah, but the whole concept of how, I mean, there's actually been a ton of behind the scenes stuff, including, you know, like pork products. They've showed us repeatedly the rooms at maybe O'Hare or whichever customs places, and how much product that has the potential to bring African swine fever to our shores. And there's a lot of a lot of traffic to China that is not agricultural in nature, that still represents potential vectoring of the ASF virus. It's very unnerving. This whole thing, as Bruce was talking about the feed ingredients, I think if you're a feed company right now, it's a real conundrum of how to get enough days to get a high enough percentage of confidence that you've eliminated this problem, because there are some things that are basic to China that we need.
Yeah.
Not unlike things that may be basic to us that other places in the world need.
Mike Naig, as the leader of the main ag regulatory agency in the state, how does a state prepare or mitigate for something like African swine fever?
Well, first things first is to try to prevent this from ever reaching our shores. And Heidi's exactly right. It takes, given that this is a foreign animal disease, it takes one incidence to create a market disruption. Regionalization is something that, of course, we are pushing for, but you know, we even have to look at how we treat countries, and you know, and think about, you know, what would we do in a situation where another country has an outbreak. I think the fact that specific to African swine fever, the fact that it's in China, in Eastern Europe, and now a case in Belgium, you know, the fact that it's in Western Europe is just yet another reminder of how real this is and how possible it is, and it's something we have to take very seriously. So what we do as the lead agency on animal disease response in the state is we work together with our industry partners, work together with USDA on the prevention side, but then you also are working parallel with the, you know, God forbid we would get this, what do we do in the case of a response? Of course, Iowa, we've got the experience of having lived through the 2015 high-path avian influenza outbreak, which was the largest animal disease outbreak in U.S. history, and ground zero, unfortunately, was here in Iowa. I'm looking at Russ Yoder, and his colleagues within Turkey and the poultry industry in this state felt that in very, very real terms. And so just trying to apply those lessons learned, trying to have those tough conversations early, you know, so that folks can prepare, and folks like Heidi can plan around what a response would potentially look like.
One other thing that, you know, may be a blessing in disguise is the fact that we had PED in 2014 that, while it wasn't in the category of foreign animal disease, was a new entrant to the biome in the United States. And so I think some of our learnings that have happened from PED and the potential of transmission of virus in feed ingredients has actually better prepared us to say what should be our preemptive plan here, that we otherwise, in the absence of PED, would kind of be standing flat-footed, I suspect.
Good point. And I think, and the reference that Heidi made too to the product that's coming in the United States, I think we're also calling on USDA to make sure that we are ramping up and have adequate inspection of these products that potentially vector that virus. So I mean, these are all things that we're doing today and need to continue to stay focused on.
You're in tune to KWPC in Muscatine, Iowa, and in tune to the 2018 Growmark KWPC Fall Ag Roundtable broadcast. We're coming to you from the Merrill Hotel and Conference Center. Today's broadcast presented by Community Bank and Trust, Kent Nutrition Group, Monsanto Bayer, Danner Farms, Sinclair Equipment, your local John Deere dealer, True Acre, Lee Insurance, Muscatine County Farm Bureau, and Duffy Grain. We'll be back after this. Back. This is the 2018 Growmark KWPC Fall Ag Roundtable broadcast. It's brought to you by Kent Nutrition Group, Monsanto Bayer, Danner Farms, Sinclair Equipment, your local John Deere dealer, True Acre, Lee Insurance, Muscatine County Farm Bureau, Duffy Grain in Wilton, Iowa, and by Community Bank and Trust. And we're getting back to the panel discussion. And during the break, there were some people that approached me and said, aren't we going to talk about this? Or aren't we going to talk about that? Yeah, we'll get to it. Okay, so let's dive right in. Heidi Vittetoe has some definite feelings on the immigration issue. It's very important to agriculture and to farmers in this state because they provide a lot of labor. What do you have to say to begin the discussion on immigration?
Well, the first provoker, if you will, of recent time was, of course, the murder of Molly Tibbetts, and the fear that came from that was going to make a example of the so-called dangers of illegal immigration. And while that person made some bad choices, I think that actually, regardless, the family has done a very good job of stepping forward and making sure that they do not become the example of how immigration policy should be followed because one bad thing happened. Both the production agriculture industries as well as the processing agriculture industries depend on having a workforce. That is not necessarily an immigration comment, but it happens that those jobs tend to be more likely to be held by immigrants. So it behooves us, while we sit at this table and talk about where we can sell more of our product all over the planet, to know that we have a workforce to produce it. And it also matters a lot to rural Iowa because immigrants tend to come from rural areas. In our case, the people who work with us tend to come from rural areas of Latin America and therefore tend to settle in rural Iowa. And otherwise, in rural Iowa, we continue to have growth of Waukee, of North Liberty, and of population centers, but we continue to lose enrollment in rural Iowa, for example, in the school systems. What does it mean to the communities of the state of Iowa to lose population and, not only have...
need to have a legal system, a legal way of getting these people in, and I think it can be done. I think we have such a polarized political system today with people on both sides that can't get together. If they would just get together and design this properly rather than sometimes ignoring the law and sometimes wanting to change the law in a way that would be absurd or ridiculous. And so we just need to get together and fix this problem, and I think it got done.
Because we don't have the access to the reliable workforce that they need. So that creates a headwind to agriculture. And of course we sit in a state that's got record low unemployment. We need something that is predictable for employers and employees and be able to meet that workforce need that we have. So it requires some leadership. It requires action at the congressional level. There's a Goodlatte bill that I think does a lot of what we need it to do, but we need to make sure that we have a guest worker program that addresses the needs of Iowa businesses and Iowa farmers. And
employees, love for them to stay, but unfortunately they're going to have to go back eventually. So, we're still short. We need something. You can't make America great again or keep it amazing unless we have people to work. Them slicers don't run themselves.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, I think what we need in Iowa is growing income.
Which is very concerning to rural Iowa, as it should be, because we now have more than 50% of Iowans living in 10 counties in our state. And our population has been, as Greg mentioned, relatively stagnant at 3 million people. Iowa is the only state in the union that hasn't doubled its population since 1900. So we have to think, what are those things that we can do to continue to attract people working on things that makes Iowa a more attractive state? So when we're working things like water quality, we're working on things like tax reform, we're working on things, the housing program, and we do have a housing program, but it's already booked out till 2022. Do we need to put more resources into those things to make Iowa a more desirable state so we have more people stay in the state and more people be attracted to our state. But it does go to the immigration, because if we were sitting in Indiana right now, they'd be talking about much the same issue of workforce. If we were sitting in Georgia, they'd be talking about workforce and whatever. It's not unique to Iowa. It's what can we do to make the difference for our state. And a lot of that will be policy and regulation to make it more attractive.
How much will the tragedy that Heidi brought up, how much is that going to affect political will, to affect constituent support as far as immigrant
it's hard to tell. We had one very tragic case, obviously, with Molly that was involved with somebody who was an immigrant, and we had an equally tragic case with somebody in Ames, with a young lady in Ames that was not an immigrant. We had tragedies. And how will public opinion sway during those issues? It's hard to tell. We can't lose sight of the fact that our country was built with immigrant population. Craig mentioned that earlier too. Most of us are some fourth generation or fifth generation or whatever. We're just maybe not the first generation as we sit here today. We have to have a policy that works. And when I think about the guest worker program, I have a really close friend who is a CFO of a grape business out in California. And when he talks about it, but they're talking about the seasonality of that. And that's an issue that we can't lose sight of on immigration, because the livestock businesses and, they can't just do the seasonality.
And that's right. And that's why I always mention, we need something that actually accommodates Iowa's needs, right? Which is we don't have that seasonality. We've got Heidi needs folks year round. Our production, processing plants need people year round, and so we've got to have something that makes sure it accommodates Iowa's needs.
And certainly we're focused on agriculture, and it's important. But in my other life, I work for a manufacturing company, and I will say that we struggle also with the ability to get people to work in manufacturing, and we need engineers, and we need people of talent level, of all talent levels, and then we're educating many of them in our universities, and then we're not able to keep them here. It's almost like I know it's probably a quip, but if you get a degree from Iowa State University, I'd like that to come with a green card because we certainly could be employing many of those engineers and IT professionals as well.
Heidi.
One of the issues that is brought up a lot of times about immigration is the inability to do proper vetting, and that's why there are quotas or why you can only process so many people. And one of the things that seems like there might be some legs to it, as I understand it, earlier on, like when there was Dutch immigration that ended up to be in northwest Iowa, that there were essentially sponsorship type programs. And because a lot of rural Iowa has second, third generations of people who still may or may not have their documents in complete order, it would seem like that there would be an opportunity for people who know people to help with that vetting process, because that's all vetting really is saying that they are who they say they are, or that this is a good person to add to the mix, not somebody who poses a threat. And I feel like we use a lot of sayings about immigration, but we have made very poor progress on both meeting our workforce needs and doing anything beyond lip service.
How are you affected?
How am I affected? A workforce matters for everybody, and when any of these kinds of things happen, let's say that there is someone who is improperly documented. Theoretically, if you are in a community where the tide turns, then people don't want to be in your community. We feel very fortunate in Washington how well the community over the last 20 years has responded to changing rural community. Our school system, has English as a second language. We have a high Latino population not only in our school system but in our neighboring school systems, and so we're a good place to go. But remember that in the hog industry, part of the mentality in a lot of cases has been to go in more isolated areas because livestock were viewed as not wanted in communities. So then how do you attract people to towns that only have a few immigrant families. What is it? Well, you're not going to get families to go to that, because how would those kids get an education? You know, the pieces have to fit together. So you take your communities in Northwest Iowa, for example, where immigration has become more embedded as part of who they are. These are great places for them to go, and they're great places for the native population to come into contact with the rest of the world.
And I don't want to leave this subject before anyone else would have the opportunity to address it if they would like to. But for now, I would like to talk a little bit about renewable fuels in general, specifically E15. During the break as well, Craig Hill brought up to me, you know, we should talk about that, and we really should. But before he has to leave, I want to see if Mike has anything to say about that. Mike's going to have to take off here in just a few minutes.
Well, I tell you, on this issue, again, we talk about uncertainty and what can we do to bring certainty into this marketplace. Seeing progress on E15 would be one of those things, and we've had a chance here to visit multiple times now with Sonny Perdue, USDA Secretary. We've had a chance to visit with Andrew Wheeler, the acting EPA Administrator. I know that our congressional delegation, our governor, our commodity groups, our the industry itself, working diligently to try to move us in the right direction on securing that year-round access to E15. I think there's a reason to be hopeful that we will see an announcement here soon, and maybe very soon, that we in fact will move on with that. So I think that obviously has an upside to the industry, and it's good for consumers, it's good for the environment, it's good for the corn producers in particular, and so this is something we really do need to see progress on.
And you brought it up to me, Craig Hill. What are your feelings about it, and what do you think should be done to advance this?
Well, I would tell you that the ethanol industry and the oil industry have been in battle for some time, and when Administrator Pruitt was making decisions, he tended to favor the oil industry in those decisions. Ethanol was prescribed because it helped the environment. MTBE was used back in the 80s, and it was harmful. It was a carcinogen. It had to be removed from the supply, and ethanol was an oxygenate that added not only clean air but improved environment. They were producing about 2.8, I think, gallons per bushel and 17 pounds of DDGs, a whole bunch of derivatives. It's very economically favorable, and we just need access in the marketplace. And to get that access, there was prescribed in the RFS a RINs policy, a renewable ID number policy, where there's an economic market for the value of these RINs, and it goes up when you don't blend, and it goes down when you do blend. And oil refiners like a low RIN price, but they don't like to blend. Well, that's kind of contrary. And so to take some of the RIN price down, the Administrator Pruitt was offering waivers to refiners, I think 25 or 26 of them. So I guess to sum up, we need to allow E15 into the marketplace. We need to allow the market to work with the RINs, and if they don't blend, the price is going to go up for those RIN values. But we need to move on. Administrator Wheeler has been reluctant. He asks, what can we offer back to the oil industry to get E15? The bargaining needn't be done. We just need to do the right thing.
And I'd be remiss, Wayne, if I didn't call on you to address this as well. I'm sure you have some definite feelings on this.
Well, President Hill and Secretary Naig have made a wonderful case for RFS. I'm not sure why I'm here. One thing to not lose sight of, absolutely this has been good for mankind. It has improved the air quality in major cities, and it has been a service to the health of millions of Americans. The second thing is to understand that the exports of ethanol are sort of a sleeper issue. Last year we exported about 10% of our production, 1.3, 1.4 billion gallons. And that's not just a one-off deal. That's to 76 different countries around the world. So when you export this marvelous product that has caused a wealth build in American farmers and improved the lives of Americans, when you export that to 76 out of the 200 countries in the world, people pay attention. It's a good thing. It's come on down because this is working. 46 countries have clean air mandates that involves in their portable fuels an oxygenate that is not MTBE. And they're phasing it out very methodically if they can get their hands on enough ethanol. Brazil, oddly enough, a huge ethanol producer, was our biggest customer last year. That's a sleeper issue that our consumers, our farmers may not understand because their sugar cane is going to make sugar rather than ethanol. I hate to make Heidi nervous again, but in China, they have an E10 mandate. And that's a controlled economy, a controlled government. A central committee decides that. By 2020, it'll be E10. It's one province at a time. But they said the only place they can go to understand how to incorporate this into the fuel system is the United States. We're the only place that knows how to do that. They are building ethanol plants. They're either going to import ethanol or they're going to import corn, one of the two, because they don't have enough of either one of them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and of course the other side of this is biodiesel. Rob Ewoldt, I want to see what you have to say about that, and what we certainly need to revisit biodiesel if we're going to talk about E10 and E15.
Yes. So I don't sit on a biodiesel board, so I get everything kind of from my other board members. But biodiesel is a great renewable fuel. I mean, you just think about how we make it, and it all came about because we had a whole bunch of vegetable oil sitting there going bad. So we needed to come up with a use, and we came up with a great use. California has really been a great market for Iowa biodiesel. I mean, when you look at their emissions out there on the diesel engines, so we're really pushing it. What I see, we had a meeting about 2 months ago dealing with a 5 billion bushel bean crop, and we had a lot of these futurist people come in and talk to us about where we see this going in the future, and they said soybean market was going to be oil driven, not protein driven anymore, in the next 5 to 10 years, and mainly because they see the renewables, that biodiesel is there as a renewable, and it's very environmental friendly. And these nations around the world are very interested in using oil. Palm oil is kind of going by the wayside because of environmental issues. So we see it coming down the way. This kind of leads into our new customer, not new, but Europe, in buying soybean meal from us. They want soybean meal. Well, we need to value added. Instead of having whole beans going down the river, maybe we need some more crush facilities around. It would help out the livestock industry to make soybean meal more available. It would help out the biodiesel, and we're value added. We talked about that earlier, that we need to be value added, and I think going to an oil or a component based, for soybeans, whether you're protein or your oil, is something that we need to look at, considering our economic situation right now and moving forward. I think biodiesel is a great way to add value to our product.
Billie Danner, you must also have something to say about when you harvest those crops that you're harvesting fuel along with feed and other uses.
Yeah, I'd like to add to what Wayne. I had some conversation with some people from the National Feed Grains Council, and what I found was they believe our next big market is ethanol to these other countries, and to the mandate that China has, and it's happening in Europe. And when you talk about value added, the beauty of that is we're processing it here. We're not sending a raw commodity over there to be processed, and that's huge. That's absolutely huge here. So there's a lot of bright spots in that arena.
So anyone else have anything to add? Oh, Wayne, go ahead, please.
Ethanol is the star of the show, but a secondary, and Bruce can talk to this, a secondary benefit is that many countries do not allow the import of raw corn or raw soybeans, but they do allow the import of feed ingredients, of which DDGs and soybean meal qualify. And so as we expand our markets for ethanol and make more of these feed ingredients available, we expand our market internationally. Okay, and also with
work that international market, not only ingredients, but also we can expand those markets through the export of the fuels themselves.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, Tom, just to go by, some people think that ethanol is a competitor. You know, we have to use feed ingredients, and we're a competitor. Me and are, but we're a big. You know, when $7 corn, we weren't really a big favor of ethanol, but you know, everybody we've learned to live with it. You know, when I started in this industry, our feed conversions were 2.9 pounds of feed per pound of gain of meat. Well, now we've lowered that to 2.4, 2.3 pounds of feed. You know, we've gotten our efficiencies better. We've eliminated 70,000 feed trucks deliveries of less feed than it would have took 20 years ago. So, you know, just with our efficiencies as livestock producers, you know, we've learned to live with E15, and as a small community and a corn producer, we need ethanol.
Liz Hobart with Growmark FS. We're talking about sustainability as far as your company is concerned, and kind of looking out into the future. We're reminded of this when we talk about renewable fuels. Tell me what you have to say about this, and if this at all fits into the Growmark footprint.
So I think when we talk about sustainability, and we're talking about a lot of these issues that create that uncertainty, it's very important that we have some challenges, but we need to also seek those opportunities. And when you talk about it from market accessibility, whether it's renewable fuels, whether it's the raw commodity, whether it's the production of livestock or poultry, I think it's very important that we continue to look for those markets on a variety of fronts of everything that agriculture has to offer. And I think that it's very important that, you know, from the consumer perspective, when you talk about like the E15 or some of those, the waiver here in Iowa, or the waiver on the national level, I think that we have a consumer market for it, and we need to let that consumer market drive what that policy is and allow that ability for the consumers to have what they choose. And if I can kind of shift gears a little bit, I think when we talk about sustainability too, I think the collaboration, and I think the collaboration of efforts at the local level, and as we talk to policymakers, it's very important that we continue to work and have a strong, unified voice from agriculture on a lot of these issues. We can't take for granted that our policymakers understand some of these issues that are facing us, and I think that we need to continue to work together. Even those that support us, I think that we need to make sure that they have an understanding, and they need that support to help tell some of their colleagues as we move forward on a lot of these challenging issues.
Rob Schmidt, I wanted to bring up to you or ask you about what's on the horizon for technology in agriculture and how much that is going to change what we do today.
Well, as we know, there's been a lot of changes in, you know, size of computers and how much, you know, how much data we can store on certain things. And so that's actually a good thing and a bad thing. Okay, so we have a lot more data now out there, though, you know, so we could store it easily. So now we're transporting more data around through broadband and that. And with agriculture, that's a bit of an issue because, as you know, rural communities don't have great signals, don't have great use to be able to transport that data back and forth electronically. But where we see things going is, I know the, you know, USDA is talking about, hey, can we get to sort of farmer.org so we can do all of our reporting online? So if we can take our crop insurance, we can take this data straight off the combine, straight off the planter. And if we can start to report our crop insurance, report everything to the FSA, and just do it through one website that makes things more efficient for agriculture, makes things easier for them, it's going to save them time, because right now as they go out and do the reporting, it's a lot of work. You know, especially as guys are farming in multiple counties, they have to go to multiple FSA offices. They got to try to get into their crop insurance. Well, if we can get the accuracy system working well inside of USDA and get it to the point of farmer.org, there can be some real efficiencies gained for agriculture, for farmers, as they're trying to wear many hats out there.
Ease and efficiency are a couple of things that are important, of course. But Rob, tell me about privacy issues and how those are being addressed and taken care of.
Well, a lot of that, people are worried about it now because we talk about the data, it's electronic, so now it's a bigger deal. But most of that information, especially that's going through accuracy, going through crop insurance, we've been giving that information to the government in multiple ways for many years, okay? But now all of a sudden it's become a bigger deal because of the electronic use of that data. So I think we have to stop and also look and go, okay, what is it being used for? Is it being used in a way that really is helping my competitor, or is it a way that's going to use to help make agriculture better? And so, yeah, there is some privacy issues because I maybe don't want my neighboring farmer to see how I've been farming that ground over there so that he can come in and know how to take that ground away from me, either by buying it or renting it out from underneath me. So there are some issues that way, but otherwise, how do we use that data to make agriculture better, more efficient, help our return on investment? That's what a lot of the data is being used for today.
Yeah, Billy, Danner, give me your feelings on what you think of the privacy issues here and the security issues when it comes to technology on the farm and the data that's generated by this.
Well, as Rob mentioned, it's a huge concern to all farmers that are participating in that to any degree, and a lot of companies are now selling it on the premise that we own it. And we hope that's the case, but I think that's the only way it's going to work for us. I mean, it's a definite concern that our information is just public knowledge, and we don't feel it should be like that.
Craig Hill, I know that Farm Bureau has been working on the issue for quite some time as well about the issue of just maintaining privacy and determining who owns that data out there. What's the latest on that, and what action's been taken?
Well, there has been policy developed, and it is the farmer's data. You own it. It's a business proposition, and even more secure should it be than your personal information, because it is a business bit of information. And increasingly, we're going to be asked to provide more and more data. When that feed truck shows up, what variety of feed, how was it fed, what was the climate in the building of those pigs that were fed that feed, what was the genetics, everything about your production may be requested upon you by who you deliver your product to. And so that data is very important, and you should be able to revoke it if you want it back. You should be able to have it transferred to somebody that you would rather it be sent to, but it should be controlled and owned by you unless you're compensated in some way for the use of that data, and that may be another market that's availed to farmers is to be paid for their data, and that would be a business decision for those farmers to make. But it's a very critical issue, and I think people don't recognize how important this may be. Your yield information, your production information, your marketing information, you want that to be public and accessible to your competitors and your rivals and others, or would you rather it be secure?
Billy Danner has something to say about that as well.
Too, on what Craig's talking about is as farmers, we want to be transparent with our yield data, how we're producing things, what we're using for antibiotics, whatever the case might be, feed ingredients. But so you can talk about the same data, and when it starts to being used as a competitive advantage against you, then it becomes a different story for us. So we're kind of caught in the middle there on what we want to provide and what we feel like we should not provide.
Is there a way around? Is there a solution to that, Billy?
I'm not sure about that. I don't have one.
Yeah.
I don't have one for that.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything to add on the issues of data or anything that we've talked about? Rob?
Well, I guess I take a different approach sometimes on the data thing, because I think there's a lot of big companies out there and the technology that they're using as far as with satellite imagery and what they can come up with and what they're learning on for yields and getting better pictures. I think some of these companies might know more than we do as far as what's out there before we get into the field. And I think they're just getting better. So they're going to have some of that yield data already. But what this technology thing, where we see things happening is in the blockchain and trying to, when we're exporting our commodity and we're able to source verify all the way back up to that this was grown on Rob Ewoldt's farm and it was in this field on his farm operation. That's where this thing's going to end up going. And that way they can if they want to go sustainability, they can follow it back and they can come to that exact field where they bought that truckload of beans or that container load of beans and say, hey, look, there's cover crop on that field, so they're doing something sustainable, and they can prove that to their investors. So this technology, it's here to stay, and it's very important, and it's going to help us market our crop to other countries, and just that we can show that traceability. So that's what this technology is really helping us with.
There are a lot of subjects that we've touched on here today, but many, many more that we have not. So just before we wrap this up, I was just going to kind of make this an open mic night and see whether anybody has any subjects that we have not touched on, or that you'd like to touch on or add to that we have not yet today. And I would be glad to give anyone the opportunity. I don't see anyone bearing into the mic right now, but Heidi does have her hand up.
I just want to say that if I was a non-farm listener, one of the biggest challenges we've talked about today is this abundance. It's weird that we have so much that we have big problems because of so muchness. And so I just want to kind of bring it back around to say this is a first world problem, and that producers in particular also need to be mindful as their yields have increased, at least in the listening area that we're in here. As your yields have increased, don't pass on opportunities, rework your break evens to make sure that you don't pass up opportunities to make the best of the abundance paradigm here and waiting for $5 corn to come back, because it doesn't look like that's a realistic possibility in the coming 12 months based on what we know today.
Yeah, maybe not in the coming 12 months, but who knows? Because we have this abundance. This is obviously good news for somebody, and it sure beats something the other way around. So there is some good news in that, and I think I'm going to go around the room. Oh, do you have something with that?
Well, on the trade problem, I think we get hung up in our own little worlds, and we're talking about our markets and our profitability. But the flip side of that is what I feel is affecting us probably even more is the cost of our goods and services, and that's probably more immediate than the actual marketing of our products.
And with that, I'm going to just go around the table once again and just give a quick wrap up to either what you've heard, what you'd like to add to this. We'll start with Bruce Reed. Oh, by the way, Mike Naig has had, as I said before, he had to take off, so he is gone. We're glad to have had him be part of this panel today. But Bruce Reed, also we're glad to have had you be part of this in the Kent Nutrition Group. What would you have to say in closing?
Thanks, Tom. Well, we've heard a lot of negative today. I think everybody's uneasy about what the world economy is, what our own local economy is. But I guess I have a privilege of working for a company. It's going to sound like an advertisement, but I work for the Kent Nutrition Group. We're celebrating our 90th anniversary in Iowa. We started in Iowa. We have grown in Iowa. We add a little over $1 million per day to the Iowa economy on what we do. That's diversification, all four business groups that we do. We only are in the ag business and the food business. And I think there's a lot of companies that are unique to that. We have a world presence or a footprint. We work in many different countries with many different people. And, we wouldn't be 90 years old if we didn't have a lot of diversification and innovation in what we do. And so we're looking at the next 10 years as an opportunity for growth. And how can we do that? We're always looking for that. And Iowa economy is very important to what we do from a world footprint. So there's an opportunity for everybody in the room. And I know I've said this before, I work with a lot of different groups, whether it be the swine, the poultry, the beef, even the crop side of it. We have a lot of power if we become one voice. as a business unit. And I think we kind of forget about that as we leave this room, or even if I leave other meetings, that just think of the power we'd have if we would work as a group instead of sometimes individuals. So, yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce,
Thanks,
for
Tom.
being part of this. Wayne Humphreys.
As we travel outside of our country and we explain to people that we are from Iowa, there is no further explanation needed. You don't have to hold up a map and point to the center of this country. We are recognized for our marvelous soils and our very productive people, and we should be forever proud of that. When trade works, the world wins, and not everybody in the world can be expected to be sustainable, but they can be expected to trade and make themselves sustainable with other like-minded people wherever they may have been born in the world.
Russ Yoder, it's been nice to have you on this panel representing the Iowa Turkey Federation.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and just like to thank Mike Naig. I mean, he had to take off, but got to know him over the last few years and been a great friend of the Iowa Turkey Federation. And being part of the the Iowa Turkey Growers Cooperative, we've known what it means to partner with people. And we've partnered with our group down in at Wayland. We own a feed mill, and we're can't feed dealers. And when my dad was running it back in the early 80s, we were probably the biggest can't feed dealer at the time back in the early 80s. So yeah, congratulations on your 90th anniversary. That's a great deal. But I'd also like to, how Iowa, you know, we were voted, U.S. News and World Report said that we're the best state, best run state, best place to live in the United States. And I just want to comment on that. We have great representatives like Gary Carlson, and got to meet a lot of people. Being president of the Iowa Turkey Federation, I'm got 1 foot out the door. I only got about 3 months left, but they're keeping me on the board, so I can't just run out the door, or maybe they'll chase me. I don't know, but just been great people to talk to. We have great leaders. Kim Reynolds as governor. I got to present the Turkey Federation. She got to pardon our turkey last year, and I get to do that again this year. And just a wonderful, wonderful governor, and just a great lady. And just remind everybody about Heidi talked about of our abundance. Yeah, we talk about all the problems we have, but Venezuela has got a bigger problem. They can't even afford to buy half their food that they need. So I'll just leave it at that, and what a great place to live in is Iowa.
Well said. Well said. Billie Danner, also it's been good to get your input on this.
Well, it's been a pleasure to do this. I guess I'm going to echo a little bit what Wayne talked about. I've had the opportunity in the last year to visit Japan. Japan Cornstarch, so a company that utilizes our non-GMO corn extensively, and we had the opportunity a few weeks ago after the Farm Progress Show to have a large Brazilian group visit our farm, and it's really interesting from a farmer perspective, a farmer from Iowa, the great deal of respect that we get, the things that they see, and that the Japanese, they're very proud of the fact that their corn is from Iowa and not from anywhere else. It's not from, and there's a lot of accountability, as a lot of you probably know, as far as they know where it's grown, the field, how it was grown, everything. They want to know who's growing it. And actually that visit spawned a visit from Japan Cornstarch to our farm back in June, which was very cool. But it's been a learning experience last year with those groups being through our farm.
Reciprocity is always nice. Virgil Schmidt from Iowa State University, we appreciate having you on board and getting your perspective about what's happening out in the field.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here, and I might actually shift gears just a little bit and pass on something that Chad Hart, who is our grain marketing specialist, has indicated about the markets. When he and his counterparts from the other land-grant universities in the upper Midwest get together, the way they describe themselves is short-term bears, long-term bulls. The bears, because as Bruce has indicated, we've had a lot of negativity here in terms of the uncertainty and the prices and so forth. But as we work through that and they look beyond the next 5 years or so, they see an awful lot of opportunities out there, and so they are long-term bulls. Our challenge is to work with people like Sean to my left here and make sure that we can stay in business and take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, and I appreciate Sean also passing along his perspective from a banker's point of view as how ag lending is going. Sean, thanks for being here.
Yep, just continuing the financial value on the farm, and to interject on what Heidi had said, we're losing some of the youth from the rural areas and they're moving to an urban setting, and there's a lot of programs that are out there from the FSA to get involved with ownership of property, not just the youth, but anyone with a social disadvantage or anything like that on some low down payment and long-term financing. So there's tools and options available out there for anyone. So
that means opportunities. Ethan Schmidt, thank you so much for being part of this.
Thanks for having us here. Great panel. Obviously as an equipment dealer, low prices are tending to lead to lower sales, but internally that leads to our agronomy team finding more motivation for finding ROI for our growers, whether it's options in seed, fertilizer, either rates, placement.
The quotas we talked about were, I don't know what the basis is there, but we know, but it's really bad. It's way worse than what it is at the river, and they don't get the yields we do either, right? So you think about how they're trying to survive up there with agriculture, and there's so many of us in the room that are connected but aren't necessarily farming ourselves. This has a big deal. So how can we go help make everybody better and go help make agriculture better is a big deal for, I think, the rest of us in the room that aren't just farming.
With adversity comes innovation. I appreciate your input on that. Heidi, Vittetoe, it's always nice to get your input and your suggestions on some of these subjects that should be brought up. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's a busy fall out there. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of stress, so watch out for one another. Thank you.
Yeah, and Rob Ewoldt from the Iowa Soybean Association. It was good to get your input too on the importance of demand for soybean growers.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope everybody has a safe harvest out there, and like I said, if there's one bright side to down markets, we will move this product because right now we're the cheapest in the world, so they'll come and buy from us.
The best cure for low prices is low prices. Representative Gary Carlson, it's good to have you on here and to get a state legislator's perspective on what's out there and having the money to do what needs to be done.
Well, thanks very much. I always enjoy coming. I take a lot of notes when I'm here as well. I always learn something by participating in this forum. And earlier in my career, I spent a number of years outside this country working and had responsibilities for areas like Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And it's really nice when you're also back and you're living in your home state to remember what a wonderful country, wonderful state we have. And the harvest season is going to be followed closely by the election season, and we just want to remind all listeners to take that opportunity to do a right that we have in this country, and that's to vote.
And I never fail to get a good perspective on the ag issues and the solutions or possible solutions from Craig Hill, the president of the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation, board member of the American Farm Bureau Federation. Thank you for being here, Craig, and having to get off the combine for a while to do this.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for allowing me some time here today. And I would have to mention that, like many of you around the